Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh HaMikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh HaMikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Neshama shir chadash.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome back to the Yiboneh Midrash. Welcome home to Torah. A warm welcome home to Torah. For those who are familiar, we are using the Kli Yakar as the basis for our discussion. And if you're interested in the original Hebrew sheets, there's a link down below. Just as a preface, because we're in the month of Elul, and we're talking about appointing judges over us. Just imagine we're about to go to Rosh Hashanah, right? We're in the month of Elul. Today's Rosh Chodesh, Chodesh Tov. So the idea of appointing judges over yourself is going to be the theme, which is no coincidence that this is coming out immediately before Rosh Hashanah, right before Rosh Hashanah. We do have a campaign. We distribute a lot of tzedakah to needy families in financial distress, and there's a link below. You can donate as well, besides finding the important Hebrew sheets. There'll be a link. Okay, so let's begin. Again, we are always text heavy, which we encourage you to learn the Hebrew, but it's very spiritually enlightening, and at least that's how I look at it. So let's begin. The first verse, Shoftim v'shotrim, right? These are judges and officers. The officers are the ones who enforce what the legislature has developed. That's the judges. Titein lecha. The Kli Yakar wants to point out, Titein lecha is second person singular, right? Titein lecha, place upon you, place upon yourself. B'kol sha'arecha, in all your gates, asher Hashem elokecha, nosei lecha. In all the gates and all the cities that Hashem has given you, we're talking about what? Eretz Yisrael. Lishvatecha, for your tribes. V'shafetu esa'am. Notice it says v'shaftu. And what will these judges do? They will judge the people. Esa'am. Mishpat tzedek. The Kli Yakar wants you to focus on the word v'shafetu. Notice that it's not a command form, but you are commanded to place judges over yourselves, right? And it's singular, over yourself, which is significant. And then it says they will judge the people. And what his thesis is, at least in the beginning, is that if you appoint proper judges, because that's the mitzvah, to appoint judges that are not corruptible, who have integrity, okay? And as a result, if you appoint judges, remember the kind of person who's in a position or authority to appoint or even place as a candidate, right? We know in America, we have the highest officials usually make someone a candidate, and then it passes through the Senate, right, for the Supreme Court. So what is the expectation? Everyone knows. Nobody's, right, hiding under a rock that doesn't know this, right? You'll notice every time there is something that goes to the Supreme Court, they already know that X amount of judges were appointed by this president or by that president, right? Is he either Republican or Democrat? And the majority of justices usually, right, are going to end up voting the way, well, at least remember, they were chosen because of their political views, but it's as if they owe something to the person who appointed them. So if the person who appointed them ever had to go before this court, you might expect that the judge is going to be biased. This is what we call a corrupt system. Okay? So what does God want? God wants you to appoint someone over yourself, meaning you're under the law, as opposed to above the law, which we all know, I shouldn't say we all know, but it seems to be that there were certain politicians who were criminals, and the media they claim this person is above the law, right? There seems to be a two-tier system of justice, where you have, right, not everyone is going to be judged the same way. And that's going to be a problem. So God wants us to have a correct system, a non-corrupt system. And so the Kli Yakar begins by pointing certain things out. It says like this. According to the Kli Yakar, and he understood Hebrew better than most of us, and even if we understood Hebrew, he's a very deep thinker. So he says, what it should have said, it would have been consistent. Titein lecha, you should place over yourself, in order that they will judge you. Right? Wouldn't that make sense? It says in order they should judge the people. But it says, V'shavtu otcha is what it should have said, in order that they will judge you. But you know what? He claims right there, Ki milat otecha tovo bimkom titein lecha, that it would have been consistent, right? The first statement is titein lecha, place over you, singular, second person. And therefore, that's why he's suggesting v'shavtu otcha, that they will judge you. But the Kli Yakar goes on and says, "U'makam mishafatu," and in place of that they will judge, as we know, judge the people, havile lamemar v'yishpatu, with the yud, which makes it not just future tense as opposed to present tense perfect, but future tense in a command form. That they must judge the people. They will judge the people. They're commanded to judge the people. No, since that yud, future tense, is not there, he says it's just a statement of fact. Again, going back to this thesis, that if you appoint judges who are not going to show favor to you, the one who's involved in and has the authority to appoint the judges, then for sure, as a result, they will also judge the people fairly. Because that's how the pasuk ends, right? That they're going to judge the people, mishpat tzedek, with righteous judgment. So the Kli Yakar goes on, Ki'im hoda'at dvarim shechach yeh. But rather, this statement that they're going to judge without the yud, it's just a fact. That is what he uses the words hodat dvarim. It's just a narrative. It's just a fact that will come to pass if you appoint judges with integrity. Now, he goes on to say, Bi'ur he'inyanhu, the actual clarification and explanation is as follows. Shapasuk zet sivoy lemi sheyesh sipuk biyado limanot dayanim. That this verse is actually a command, titein lecha, a command to those who have the ability, who have the authority, that is in their ability to appoint judges. Sheyamana otam al manat, that when you appoint them on a certain condition. Shayu dayanim lo. Dayanim lo, right. In order that they will judge you. They're going to judge the people who are in the authority and position to appoint the judges. So in order that they would lo yachanifu afilu lezeh hamamona otam, that they will not show favor, they will not be flattered, right? Flattery is the word here. They won't show favor even to those whose job or authority is to appoint judges. Now, what about this idea that it says the people, right? They're going to judge the people. Okay? So it does say, Titein lecha, you shall appoint over yourself. Al atzmecha. So these people in the authority to appoint the judges, they're appointing them over themselves. They're appointing people who are righteous judges over the people with the authority. V'nimshach bizeh b'kal v'chomer. Now what results from this, what stems from this, what comes out from appointing judges with integrity that are not going to show the people with authority favor, a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer is one of the 13 hermeneutical principles in which we derive lessons from. This is called basic logic. that if sheyishbatu es kol ha'am mishpat tzedek, if they're going to judge you who have the authority to appoint them, and you're going to appoint them over yourself, and they're going to judge you properly, then for sure they're going to judge the rest of the people properly. That is just pure logic. Ki im lo yachinifu gam lecha, because they're not going to show you any favor. The ones who appointed are not going to be shown favor. Kal v'chomer l'kol ha'am. It stands to reason that they're not going to show favor to anybody else, because if they owe anybody favor, it's the person that was responsible for putting him in that position. Now we understand why Moses says v'shafatu, right? They will judge. This is a language or terminology of hoda'at devarim. Hoda'at devarim, we said, is just a narrative. It's the simple, like facts, the facts on the ground. That is what will be. Lomar shekach yihiyeh bivadai bekal v'chomer. This will be the result of appointing judges who are not going to show you favor, meaning you the authority to appoint them. Then for sure they will not show anybody else favor, because if anybody they owe favor to, it's you. Now the Kli Yakar goes on. Now he lived 450, almost 500 years ago, and he says something a little bit harsh to his generation. Lo kaminhag dorenu. This is not like what we do in our days. Meaning, what the Torah prescribes, we're not really doing properly. Shekol mi asher sipek biyado lemanot dayanim, because it's a fact, according to his observation in his generation, that those people who have the authority to appoint judges, to put them up as candidates, borer lo kroido o miyuadao. Either they're choosing people who are their relatives or people they're familiar with, people they know. Doime ki'ilu, he says it's as if. Hitna imo beferush almanat sheyechanif lo. Right, without words. As soon as I appoint you or put you up as a candidate, then it's as if we made a condition, beferush, even though we didn't say it. It's as if we made an explicit condition, unspoken, that the judge will favor me, who appointed him, favorably. V'chein oisim. And the Kli Yakar is saying that's what is happening in our days. This is what's happening. V'nimshach mizeh shegam kol ha'am afilu rechoikim lo yishpatu tzedek. And as a result, what stems from this is that the entire people, other people who are not related, will not be judged properly. Ki hadayan tzarik lahashvot kol hadinim. Because what does the judge need to do? He's obligated to judge everyone equally. When all cases come before him, it doesn't matter, a guy is dressed in a beautiful suit, tie, right? And the other person is dressed like a schlump, disheveled. You cannot think that the person who's clean-shaven and well-dressed is innocent. He could be lying too. He could be taking the person for all kinds of nefarious reasons. So he says like this, Shalo yomru lo. Remember, I'm sure it's still the case, many courtrooms have a gallery where it's not just the litigants and their lawyers. Many times that's the only people that are allowed. But there are other cases where it's open to the public. So imagine you are sitting there maybe 5 hours, 6 hours, maybe 1 day, 2 days, observing. Imagine going up to the judge and saying to him, but this is what it says, in order that people won't say the following. Etmo pesachta kach v'kach lekrovcha. You know, I was watching your verdicts, and I noticed you were giving, and I'm going to use the word, he doesn't say, leniencies to your relatives. He just says you gave such and such to your relatives, o lemodayecha, or to your friends, o leven ircha, or even to your townsmen, right? People you're familiar with from your hometown. V'akshav ata mishane b'din kazeh. But I'm watching you, and right now I notice what you're doing to people who are not your relatives, who are, right, you're ruling differently, i.e. maybe more harsher, you're giving your relatives the lenient. So basically this would harm everybody. This kind of judge is corrupt, and that is not the kind of judge that we want. So, now the Kli Yakar is going to suggest a deeper layer of what Moshe said. Remember Moshe said, they will judge the people. Now we mentioned it in third person. We asked, shouldn't it have been consistent? Titein lecha, so they will judge you. Place them upon yourself, so they will judge you. That would have been consistent. So the Kli Yakar says, Al derech haremez yesh lefaresh. On the level of a remez. Remez is a deeper level than the simple pshat, the simple understanding. Shebekol makom shneimar ha'am. That the truth is, anywhere in the Tanakh, in the 5 books of Moses, where it mentions the word ha'am, who's it speaking about? So Rashi says on Numbers chapter 11, verse 1, where the people were complaining. So anytime the word the people appear, Rashi says over there when it says the people sought to complain, V'hi ha'am kimit onanim, that Rashi says over there, this is talking about the Rishayim. There's other places it mentions that whenever the ha'am is used, it's talking about the hapachut shaba'am. In other words, the most inferior of the people. Another place it says it's talking about the Erev Rav. I don't think there's any contradiction there. I think it all means the same thing. So the word people, by the way, when God says to Moses about your people who you took out of Egypt, that's a clear-cut proof he was talking about the Erev Rav. When God speaks highly of the Jewish people, he says, Ami, my people. God himself calls the Jewish people my people. But in general, just stam, the word ha'am is referring to the Rishoyim, the evil people. Rabbeinu Zikrona Livracha Amru, it says in Pirkei Avot, Kishabale dinim oimdim lifanecha, right? You're a judge, and when the litigants are standing there in front of you, yiyu beinecha kirishayim, right? They're going to be, you're supposed to view them both as evil, as guilty, until the verdict is said, and when they both accept the verdict, then you look at them as tzaddikim. Okay? That's in Pirkei Avos chapter 1, verse 8. So, this is a warning or a statement of fact. This is what a judge has to view, right? As if they're both guilty. Again, just because a man is dressed nice and the other one isn't, should never be a reason to think that one is guilty and one is innocent. And when they come before you hear all the evidence, you have to be fair. So what do they say? I think in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. Now that's true. I'm not going to deny that's true. But for the judge has to look at both to get to the bottom of what happened. So he can't show favoritism, as we're going to explain later. But once they accept the verdict, then they become as righteous people. So the pasuk said, "V'shaftu es ha'am," right? That they will judge the people, meaning they're going to look at the people equally as guilty at the time of judgment. L'chak ne'emar v'shaftu es ha'am. That's why it says they're going to judge the people. Ki b'shah ha'mishpat yu beinecha keshar ha'am. That when they come in front of you for judgment, you're going to look at them just like all the people. You're going to judge the people, ha'am, as if they were rishoyim, asher rishoyim mechunim behem. That's like a nickname, right? The word ha'am is an associated name with the evil people, and therefore, in your eyes, at the time of judgment, you're going to look at the people equally as if they're all guilty until the evidence says otherwise. Now, we did say that it starts off Titein Lecha, which is first person, and then at the end we said it speaks third person about the people, but it also says mishpat tzedek, right? Amna mishpat tzedek. You're going to judge them righteously. There's going to be a righteous judgment. So, what does that mean? Mishpat tzedek. Achar hamishpat yithapek harashayim letzedek. As we said, after the judgment, because they're looked at as ha'am, guilty, but at the end of the day, it's mishpat tzedek, that after they accept the judgment, they're transformed into being righteous, at least in the eyes of the judge. Kiyu beinecha katzadikim, for the litigants will appear righteous in your eyes. When? Kishikabalu aleim es hadin, once they accept the judgment. So the Kli Yakar continues. He has another interpretation of what it means, titein lecha, place upon yourself. There is a concept, we spoke about it recently, in order to be a judge, because you're basically correcting the behaviors, right, of other people, that you have to first correct yourself before you can correct others. There's a general concept anyway in rebuke and tochacha. We spoke a few weeks ago about the famous rabbi who had a tree that overhung into the public thoroughfare, and it blocked people and did damage. And there was a person brought to court in front of him who had exactly the same problem. And what he said to the person, to the defendant, he said to him that, I want you to come back tomorrow for the judgment. I mean, that puts the guy out. He has to come back the next day. But why did the rabbi tell him to come back tomorrow? Because overnight, he cut his own tree. Because it was in the public thoroughfare. How can he judge someone else and tell him it had to be cut? So he went home that night and he cut his tree. The next day, the litigant who knew this rabbi had a tree in the public thoroughfare, when the rabbi said to him, you have to cut your tree. He says, but Rabbi, don't you have exactly the same problem I have? How can you tell me such a thing? Well, the rabbi had some justification, of course, because he already cut down the tree. And he said to this litigant, listen, I'm telling you have to cut down the tree, because that's the right thing to do. Now, you can go to my house and see if that's true. You're making a comment that I have a tree overhanging into the public thoroughfare. If I do, I will cut mine as well. But, of course, the person went, checked it out, and it was already cut. So you cannot try to help others until you help yourself. You can't correct others until you correct yourself. And that's what it means. Let's hear. DEVORAH, another interpretation. Shoftim v'shotrim, right? These judges and officers, titein lecha. Each person, each of you, it's singular. Everyone has to appoint these judges over himself. I mentioned this is the beginning of Elul. Meaning you have to kashut atzmecha tachila. You have to fix yourself first. V'achar kach, and only later v'shaftu es ha'am. And then you can judge people. You cannot judge the people until you have fixed yourself first. Likshot zulato, right? Which is the idea that when you want to judge others, it means to fix others. You want to correct them. You have to fix yourself first. Now there's a Gemara in Baba Basra 58b that says, the kol dayana damafkin mine mamona bedina lav dayanahu. If a judge ends up being taken to court and money is rightfully extracted from him because he is in the wrong, I mean, if he owed somebody money, he should correct it. Why wait to go to court to find out you're guilty? So if that's the case, if you were ever in a court where you were found guilty and had to pay up, you're not qualified to be a judge. Make sense? So I think today we have social media, and they claim once you're on social media, you do something stupid, you do something wrong, you do something immature, this stays with you forever. So number one, that's my warning to anybody. First of all, you should never do these things, and then you shouldn't record yourself doing them, and then you shouldn't put yourself up on social media. These things stay with you forever. So start from the beginning. You want to be a judge, or you know that you're qualified to be a judge, then stay straight, right? Pay up your debts to society pay up when you know that you're wrong. Okay, now we're going to start the next verse. Lo titeh mishpat. Now the word tateh doesn't literally mean pervert. You shall not pervert judgment. What it means is to lean, to slant. Okay? Lean, slant. So the scales of justice are not even. That's what we're going to consider perversion of justice, when the scales of justice are not even. Okay? And then also, lo takir panim, it says don't recognize people. I mean, don't show favor to people. Okay? And the third thing is lo tikach shochad, and don't take a bribe. You should not accept a bribe. Now I want you to notice before we go on, there's a vav. Where do you see the vav? Not before don't pervert justice. That is a single isser, a single negative commandment. Don't show favoritism. There's no vav there either. But then in the third, and don't take shochat. So the word and, now I know in English you can get away with saying a few items without the word and. You put a comma. The comma is in place of and. And then by the last, you don't put a comma and you say and use the word and. But in Hebrew, at least in this pasuk, the Kli Yakar wants to say that basically what you have, even though you have three distinct commandments, you really have two are distinct, and the third is a subcategory of the second one. So you have like A, and you have B, and then you have subcategory of B. That's how he's going to explain this, and what he says makes a lot of sense. Midalo kamar, from the fact that it does not say with a vav, velo takir panim with the vav, right? Don't show favoritism. There's no vav there. But it does say with the don't accept a bribe, there is a vav. Velo tikach shochad. What does that mean? Kol echad milsa ba'ape. That the first, well actually I skipped some. Shma mina, what comes out from this? What do you hear from it? What does it make heard? Lo tateh, you shall not pervert justice. Lo takir, do not show favoritism. Kol echad milsa bi'ape nafshi. These first two commands are distinct on their own. They're separate. They're each on their own. But aval lo tikach shochad, it does say with a vav, right? It's a toldos of lo takir panim. His conclusion is, and we'll see why, don't take a bribe is a subcategory of don't show favoritism. Let me ask you something. We spoke about you're the judge and you see two people in front of you. One who's clean shaven with a nice tie, nice watch, nice shoes. The whole aura about him looks very professional and maybe even wealthy. The other guy is disheveled in dirty clothes. Would you ever think that you would try to get a bribe money out of the poor person? No. The bribe, the idea of hoping for the judge, hope that he would receive a bribe, would only be from someone who has the money to pay. Let's just say like that. Obviously, there are some really corrupt systems that they don't care, and they'll hold the person, even though he's poor, to such great account and perhaps enslave these people. But in general, the judge who's corrupt is going to respect, meaning he's going to show favoritism. He's respecting someone's presence. And that is something you shouldn't do. So, what do we know? We said, lo takir panim. Listen to the words. Lo, don't. Makir, takir is to recognize. Panim, his face. We're translating, understanding it is don't show favoritism. But the word panim, face, what does that tell us? The Kli Yakar brings a proof in Genesis chapter 41, verse 56. that Ashirim, Lefisha Ashirim Nikru Pnei Aretz, that when we go to Parshas Miketz, verse 41-56, that what was happening? That there was a famine in Egypt, and Yaakov had sent the kids to go find food. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. It's number 11 on the source sheet. So the famine spread over all the face of the land. And Yosef opened all the storehouses in which there was grain, and he sold it to the Egyptians, and the famine intensified in the land of Egypt. So when it says, V'harav haya al kol penei haaretz, when does the famine really get felt by all the people? Once it reaches the upper echelons of society, right? As long as the wealthy still have food, they can hold off on what we'll say like total revolution. There might be a revolution coming from the bottom up, but as long as there's still food in the cupboards of the wealthy, it doesn't affect everybody. And it doesn't have the same effect. You know, they have more political power, they have more monetary power to overtake the government. Just happens to be, at this time as we're speaking about it, it could be in Iran, that this will eventually happen and there'll be an overthrow of the government. But it's only when it's going to reach the inner circles of the IRGC, right? Then you'll have a total, uprising that it will have long-lasting effect. So, but the Hebrew is al kol penei haaretz, on the face of the land. So, if you look at Rashi on that verse, who are the face of the land? These are the Yashirim, these are the rich people. Okay, so what is the Kli Yakar trying to say? That the idea that having, showing favor, which is what it means, lo takir panim, the face, is referring to don't look at someone like as wealthy, you're going to get a bribe. That's what I believe the Kli Yakar is saying. Ukisha'amar lo takir panim, so when it says don't show favoritism, it literally means don't recognize their face. Hainu ashirim shenikru penei haaretz. We just saw in Rashi that verse, right? That the wealthy are called the face of the earth. Ubishlo takirem az mamela lo tikak shochan. If you're not showing them respect, you're not looking them as if they're wealthy, so then you're also not going to be interested in the bribe. Hamakir pnei ashirim hu ba'avur tikva hashochad shemekave lekabel mehem. The idea is whoever respects the presence of wealth, he does so in the hope of receiving a bribe from them. Now the Kli Yakar goes on and he suggests an insight regarding that original prohibition. Lo tateh mishpat. Don't pervert justice. But we all know it doesn't mean pervert per se, it means slant, leaning. Don't slant or lean the judgment. That's meaning the judge should not put his finger on the scale to do that. So the Kli Yakar says the expression, the lashon hatiyah, the idea of leaning is mara sheshnei habali dinim yushavim be'enav. Again, it's like a command that in the eyes of the judge, the litigants must be equal in your eyes. Ki'ilu hayu shnehem munachim bekaf moznayim hashavim. As if, right, there were two pans on a balance scale and they're supposed to be equal. Lebilta hayot l'shum kaf hachreya unetia l'shum tzad. Without either one of these pans on the balance scale being slanted to one side or the other. But in your way, in your eyes, they weigh the same. Lo takir panim, right? This is the same idea. Don't show respect to someone's presence, meaning sheyu doime kilu enu makir shum echad mehem. It's at least in your eyes, make it like you don't recognize either of them. Now, I would say that's going to be difficult in a small town, right? Because you have to have a beis din in every small village, And then the larger towns, they have a beis din not of 3, but of 23. And then, of course, in Yerushalayim, you have 70. And according to some, you even have Sanhedrins of 70 in each of the tribal areas, right? So you have beis dinim all over the place. So if you're in a small town, how do you not recognize the judge? You saw him in, maybe your kids play together. Maybe you saw him in the grocery store. Maybe you're in the same field working. I don't know. But I think it would be very difficult. And what you need to do, what you should do, depends on your relationship. At some point, you may have to recuse yourself, right? Because the judge he can't even be a witness. He can't be a relative. And again, depends on the type of criminal or monetary issues, but in most cases, you can't be a relative even. You can't be biased. So you would have to recuse yourself. Now there's that third prohibition in the original statement, lo tikach shochad. What does the word shochad mean? There's a Gemara that tells us. So the Kli Yakar says, the lashon of shochad, it means it's like the shin of shehu, and then the word chad, which could mean many different things. Could mean one, it could mean sharp. Okay? So, shehu chad. That's what the Gemara says. In Gemara Ksubas 105b, it says by the rabbis, the word shochad is like shehu chad. That is one. That, shehu, chad, one. What does that mean? Shemekabel v'hanote nasu li'ish echad, that both the receiver of this bribe, of this money, and the giver of this money, they become one, like-minded, in many different ways. They become like one person. There's an idea, and that's why I believe we all need to get married, men and women, to each other, because there's like these opposites, right? There's a feminine, there's a masculine, and they are by nature keneged. There's a natural opposition. How? God has a great sense of humor, but there's a natural opposition, and one will correct the other. Okay, why am I bringing this up? Because usually, and I'm going to speak for men, I can't speak for the women, that men usually have a hard time finding fault within themselves. Okay? And when you take the bribe, what's going to happen? You become like him. So you're not going to find fault in him either. You become one. Since you have a hard enough time finding fault in yourself, trust me, your spouse will do that for you. Of course, when we were young, our parents did that for us, right? But you have a hard time finding it in yourself. And if the person is really, we're talking about he's offering you a bribe, or you're asking for a bribe, you become chad, shu chad, that the people themselves, the receiver and the giver, become one, one-minded. But it's going to really be hard to find the negativity in the other person. Ve'enze muchuvar. Now the Kli Yakar does not like this explanation. Remember, it's a Gemara. So it's not that he's not dismissing the Gemara. He's having a hard time understanding why the people, right? Don't we call the envelope the bribe? So if it's a noun, the bribe, it's not going on the people. It's going on the envelope of money. And that's what he says. This is not really clear. Shrei shochad shem hamamon. Because the very term shochad, that it is one, well, at least, or maybe sharp, we'll see, is the name of the money, v'lo shem habalim. Not the owners, not the giver or the receiver, but the money itself. Ki ba'avor shegoyrem habalim yulachadim nikra mamon al shamam. This is what we'll call a rhetorical question. Is it really because the money, it was the money that caused these owners, meaning the giver and taker, to become one? Therefore, we're going to call the money on its name, which is rhetorical, because he is of the opinion that it's the money and not the people. And he goes on to give a deeper explanation. Nir lefarish, it seems correct to explain the following. Shehu chad, the idea of the word chad is a lashon of chidud. Chidud means sharp, right? Even if it means one, like when you sharpen a knife, the two sides of the knife become sharp. That one spot, the tip of the blade, right, where the blade joins from both sides, that becomes sharp. Okay, it becomes more one-like. So chad can mean sharp, and does mean sharp. So he's going to explain it the following way. We have a verse in Proverbs 27:17. Barzel bebarzel yachad. That iron sharpens iron. Iron against iron makes sharp, right? That's how you sharpen a knife or a sword. Through, right? Iron sharpens iron. Ki hamamon doime l'sachin mechudad choytek mehera. What does this money do? The money itself, it's similar to a knife, to a sharp knife that cuts quickly, right? We've all tried to cut with a dull knife a tomato, and we've had a hard time, right? The sharper the knife, the easier it is to cut. And not only that, the sharper it is, it slices right through. V'chol dayan sarich liot matun. Matun means to go slow, okay? To be deliberate in judgment, right? In Pirkei Avot, right? The judge has to be matun bedin, to deliberate, to speak it out, to hear both sides, to delay. Shlo yichtoch hadin mehera, and not cut, not slice through the judgment quickly. Ukishikabel shochad, but when he receives that money, what's going to happen? Harehu yodea la'alter lehechen adin noite. He knows immediately, at the moment that he receives that envelope, which direction, which way the judgment is going to lean towards. V'chotcho mehera kechoitech b'sakin chad. And therefore he's cutting, he's giving the verdict already in his mind. Even if he delays and makes like he's really thinking about things, originally when he got the envelope, he already decided, he already knew where and how to cut the judgment as quick as possible, as if cutting with a sharp knife. V'lo hadayin chochek hadin. So it's not the judge who's cutting the judgment, it's the money that already cut the judgment. El hamamon chotech v'hu chad. It's rather the money, that's what's cutting, because it's the money that is sharp and cuts quickly. Now, the Kli Yakar has something to say about the very fact in verse 20, it says, tzedek tirdov. Righteousness you shall pursue. What's tirdov? To chase, to run, to go quickly. This actually hints to the idea that the judge needs to be slow. Lahamtin is to go slow, to wait, to pause. Right? Same root. Now, we're not talking about every judgment. They're deliberating, which you need to do. But once the group of judges have already concluded, they didn't make the psak, they didn't give the final verdict, but they're leaning in the direction that the person is innocent, they should conclude, get as quickly as they can to the end of the judgment that the person is innocent and declare his innocence. If they're concluding, they're arriving towards the idea that this person is most likely guilty, then what they should do is slow down and wait till the next day. Do not come to the conclusion that he's guilty today. We're talking about a capital crime. Once they take him out to kill him, it's too late. Maybe there will be evidence overnight that will be delivered by the morning, or some idea that wasn't thought about. They really are not interested in in killing people. This is what it says in our oral Torah, that any Sanhedrin that killed one person in 70 years, it's as if they have blood on their hands. They have blood on their hands. So they really did everything they could to find people innocent. But here it just mentions, right, tzedek, tirdov, that you should chase, but it's tzedek. Tzedek implies innocence and righteousness. Right? Righteousness you shall pursue. I mean, simple pshat is to set up systems of justice. But in the meantime, when someone is going to be declared innocent, be quick to declare their innocence. Let's read. See, if you are deliberate in judgment, which is the right thing, but what might happen is inoy hadin. Inoy hadin means holding out too long. And how do they translate it? Prolong, right? You're going to cause an affliction. That's what it is. Inoy is affliction. The affliction comes as a result because you're delaying the judgment more than necessary. So it is necessary to delay, but not more than that. Al Kain Amar. That's why the Torah says tzedek, tirdov. When it comes to righteousness, pursue quickly. And we know that Isaiah in chapter 1, verse 21, gave rebuke to the people. And he says, tzedek yolin bo, that righteousness lodged in her. What does that mean? So what was Isaiah giving them rebuke about? That righteousness, when they had been expunged, when they had been declared innocent, but the final verdict wasn't out yet, the guilt of the court was they didn't declare him innocent until the next day, and that is a problem. Let's go back into the Kli Yakar, where we just read in Isaiah that righteousness lodged in her. He was admonishing the Jewish people, Kederek sheparashnu lamal in Parshas Devarim, like we explained earlier in Parshas Deuteronomy, shebedine nefashos goremin gomerin bo biyom lezachut avalo lechoive, that when you have a capital case, you need to conclude, you want to conclude on that very day his acquittal, but only the following day when it comes to a chova, when it comes to a conviction. Okay, avalo lechoive. If he is guilty, it's good. It's worthwhile waiting the extra day in case more evidence would come to let him off the hook. Vehem hafchu hashita. But what did they do? They reversed the procedure. Okay, hayu malinim hatzedek. They would lodge righteousness, meaning the acquittal. They would hold over till the next day, till they acquitted the person. The hainu azachut. And based on that, that's what it means, tzedek tirdov. Remember, there's a double language, tzedek tirdov, but nevertheless, tzedek tirdov, righteousness you shall chase after. When he's innocent, go as quick as you can to release him. Ki lashon redifa, the language of rodef, chasing, is moira ala mehirus. It reflects and teaches about haste and quickness. Shimaher lichtoch hadin, that you should be quick to give the verdict. Shinidbarer zechuto, once it becomes clear that the person is innocent. Dahainu tzedek, that's what it means, righteous. But we have double righteousness. It says tzedek tirdov. So why is it said twice? So the first time it's said is because of the meaning we just said, that one should be quick to declare the innocent. And chad lema'ata choiva, and the other one is to exclude a verdict of conviction, which shechayev lahalin, which one would be obligated to wait until the next day. Right? If you think the guy's guilty, then wait until the next day. Do not pursue. Only pursue when it comes to righteousness, meaning only chase and go quickly when it comes to righteousness. If the judges are going to declare the person guilty, then do not be quick to judge. Now the Kli Yakar has his own idea of the word shochad. DEVORAH acher, shochad hu chad kecherev hachotech. Listen to this. We're going to learn that if you have a court of justice, or courts in Israel, that are corrupt, this is like the worst thing for us. This would bring war. And who knows? I'm not saying. Maybe the war we're in or have been in, maybe it's because of the corrupt system that we have. And maybe, just maybe, we have to change the system around a little bit. Okay? That happens to be what, before October 7th, a lot of tension in the land of Israel was over the authority that the Supreme Court has. But this idea goes way back to the beginning of the state. It's one of, we'll call original sins, if I can say such a thing, of Israel, to have a system of justice that's not based on the Torah and was handed over to the secular. But let's just read the words. He says, shochad is chad kecherev hachoitech. It's like a sharp sword. It's sharp like a sword that cuts. Now we have ivut hadin. Ivut hadin is perversion of justice. Is mevi cherev chad leolam. I believe this is in Pirkei Avot, chapter 5, Mishnah 8. It says that perversion of justice brings a sharp sword to the world. It's brought down in Perek HaSarah, which is chapter 5, that deals with all these different numbers, and number 10 is quite used a lot. So it says in Pirkei Avot, Cherev bo leolam al inui hadin val ivut hadin. That war, sword, the sword, cherev is like representative of war. Cherev, and that's sharp. Chad. It comes to the world on account of the prolonging of judgment and the perversion of judgment. We said there's two different things. One is when there's an innocent person and you're holding them over, which we know happens, and the perversion of judgment, which unfortunately we also know happens. Lechach nikra hashochad hama'avet hadin shochad. Shochad, right? Therefore, what does the bribe do? It perverts the judgment. The judgment is called shochad. The perverted judgment is the sword that is sharp. Shuchad kecherev. Okay, so I'm sure I'm not the only rabbi who speaks about the system of justice in the land of Israel today. In 5786, we need a major transformation. Okay, now based on what we just said, the word shochad, you're not supposed to take shochad. How does that relate to the idea of tzedek tishpot? Well, if you read the whole verse, it says also, so that you will live. Laman tichyeh. So not only tzedek tirdov, righteousness you shall pursue, but it's so that you will live in the land of Israel. Let's read the words. V'achar chach his here gamal inoi hadin. So the Torah is going to caution. The word his here is not just be warned, but become enlightened, right? Once you're enlightened about the fact that the judges are prolonging judgment, and then it says, tzedek tirdov, right? You shall pursue, righteousness you shall pursue, which is saying what we already said, that ploni, shiemacher lomer ploni ata zakai, legadlot tzidkato. One should be quick, the judge should be quick to say that so-and-so, ploni, you are innocent, and reveal his innocence, because like we said earlier, once you do certain things, unfortunately, they have a long history of staying around. So the sooner the judge declares his innocence, the better. But it also says, Laman tichyeh, so you shall live. And what does that mean? Ultimately, hanitzel min hacherev. You will be saved from the sword. You'll be saved from the wars. You'll be spared from the sword that we already said comes as a punishment for accepting bribes because of the word shochad. This perversion of justice brings a sharp sword. That's how the Kli Yakar is interpreting this. Now, why is it so important to come and live in the land and possess the land? That is our hope, that we will stay here for a long time. So the Kli Yakar is looking at Rashi's comments on that verse. V'yirashta et ha'aretz. You're going to come and possess the land. So number 15 on the source sheet is Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 20, that says, Tzedek tzedek tishpot laman tichye. But right after it says that you may live, it says v'yirashta es ha'aretz, so you will take possession of the land. Asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, which Hashem gives you. So what does it mean, justice you shall pursue? Seek out a good court. Make sure you have judges with good integrity, and if you ever need a court, make sure you choose the good judges. But that you may live and possess the land. That's what the verse says. Drum roll, please. The appointment of fitting judges, Rashi says, is sufficient merit to keep Israel alive and settled in their land. This, to me, it's so clear. This is one of our biggest problems, and for some reason we are not addressing it because it's a hot potato, I have to agree. So maybe it's not the right time, but it's always the right time to become educated, right? When the right time will present itself, things will change. But we have to become educated. And one of the biggest problems facing the land of Israel since its conception is I'll just say it, is the court system, especially the Supreme Court, because everything filters down from there. Okay, so let's see where the Kli Yakar left off. Perish Rashi. Rashi explains, Kedaihu minuyei hadayanim, that in the merit of appointing justices, the real good judges, that's what it's talking about in this parsha. Lachiyot et Yisrael. This is sufficient to keep the Jewish people alive. You want the Jewish Am Yisrael Chai? Hello? How many people are screaming that? Well, in order to have that in concrete terms, we have to have a proper system of justice. Lahoshivam al admatam, and to settle them upon the land. Now, I think what it's really saying is that through appointing the proper judges, then the Jews will be able to settle the land, because it's non-sustainable. As long as you have a corrupt system of justice, the Jews will try to possess the land, to settle the land, but they will be thrown off by their own judges. I mean, I'm just saying. That they won't be able to keep that settlement alive, right? You want to keep the Jewish people alive and to settle the land, and the passage continues and concludes, so that you will live and possess the land. V'tam lachiyot lefi she'imale mara ish esre'eyu chayim bolu. There's a concept, it's also in Pirkei Avot, that if it wasn't for the fear of the government, the people would swallow each other alive, right? Many of the times in Galut, in exile, even for non-Jewish government, we prayed for the government that it should have some kind of authority where that people would fear, so society wouldn't descend into chaos and anarchy. So too, there is, and maybe especially, I know certain people that would not pray for the government. I think the government needs our prayers more than ever before. I'm all for a mishaberach for the government, because they need healing. They need help from Hashem. So that's what it says in Pirkei Avos. If not for the fear of the government, people would swallow each other alive. Therefore, the logical conclusion is that if you have proper judges to govern the land, this will ultimately keep the Jewish people alive. We will not swallow each other alive. Meaning that people will not swallow each other alive. But what does it say? Lo shivam al admatam, and to settle them in their land. That is to cause them to dwell in Eretz Yisrael in peace. Now, there is a pasuk in Proverbs 29:4 that says, Melech b'mishpat ya'amid aretz. The idea is through justice, a king establishes the land. So this idea of king also acting as a judge and standing for and defending the right of the justice system. So we see a land is settled peacefully only through the merit of justice. You hear that? Guys, we want to settle the land, but we have to have justice. Aval kilkul hadinim goyrim hashchat haaretz. The perversion, the opposite is also true. The perversion of judgment actually causes the corruption of the land, and we see that by the generation of the flood, which was obvious that the land became corrupt. But also Yisro gave advice, and in his bracha, in his words, we're going to see this idea. He says in Exodus chapter 18, verse 23, in Parsha Shmot, he tells Moses about the system of justice, right? Appointing other people on lower courts so they can deal with some of the easier matters, and then things that are difficult will come up to you and you'll deal with them. But it says, V'gam kol ha'am hazeh al mekomo yavo b'shalom. He starts by saying, if you do this thing that I suggest to you, and this entire people as well, it does mean each person, but it's the entire people. It says, V'kol ha'am hazeh shall arrive in his place. So that's singular, mekomo, meaning the entire people will arrive in its place. Keep that in mind. So it starts off plural and ends singular, meaning his place. So the Kli Yakar says, Havile lememar ish al makomo. If you're saying that each person, right, in the beginning of the verse, the entire people, meaning each person, should arrive in their place. But it also says, Yoshe b'shalom, that will dwell in peace. So it could have said, each man shall dwell in his place in peace. Remember, makomo is singular. So it could not have been referring to the places of all the people. What the Torah must have meant, or what Yisro must have meant, was each man would dwell in peace. But if that's the case, why omit each man? Why doesn't it say literally each person? That's the first question. And secondly, the Kli Yakar asks that he presumably means to say that each man will dwell peacefully in his place in the wilderness, right? In the desert, because as if it's talking about right then and there. So why does it say that he will arrive in his place, right? The Hebrew was Yeshev b'shalom. I'm sorry, Yavo, that he will arrive in peace, right? Look in source number 21. It says, Al Mekomo Yavo b'shalom. So they're not talking about the desert. We're talking about Eretz Yisrael. They will come to rest in their place in peace. So what does that mean? Where is this place if it's not the desert? Ela shemedaber b'makom klalei hamiyuchad l'kol ha'am. That Yisro was actually referring to the general area that was designated for the entire people. Asher ke'et ratzo lavo shama. This is exactly where they intended to go. They were in the desert and they knew they were going to Eretz Yisrael. And Yisro was speaking about the end game, going into the land of Israel. What was Yisro actually saying when he gave this great idea of the hierarchy of the system of justice? Amru Yisro b'zechut minoy dayanim yizku lavo shama. That through the very act of appointing good judges, that's how you're going to get in there. That's what's going to happen. Not only are you going to get in there, but you're going to have a sustainable society where you will not be killed, there will not be war, and there will be peace. So Mekomo doesn't mean his place, but rather its place, the place of the entire Jewish people as a whole. And now we understand why Yisro did not say each man, but its place as a whole, referring to the merit that the Jewish people have in order to arrive in Eretz Yisrael. And I'll just read the last line over here. This verse 2 would indicate that the merit of appointing judges is sufficient for the Jewish people to settle the land peacefully, as we have explained Rashi's words. So that's pretty heavy. I get it. Maybe politically we're not there yet, but we have to educate. We have to be educated and educate others. We want to live here. We want a sustainability, and that's going to perhaps what they call a hafucho, a revolution of ideas. A revolution of ideas. Let me leave it at that. A revolution of ideas and sharing how important it is to have incorruptible judges that are not going to be corrupted, but have integrity and will keep the Torah themselves and share and help correct others by proper judgments based on Torah law. And with that, we'll say, this is Elo Chodesh Tov. We're getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, the Great Judgment Day. So we have to fix ourselves before we can fix others. And that's my message to you. So I don't know how we can fix the world, but we have to start with ourselves. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll have a peaceful Shabbos and a great week coming up. And I always say, have a great year. Have a great year. See you next week.
Yiboneh